How much does a data engineer make? Probably the most common question on Reddit and other forums. And unfortunately, it's usually people being discouraged because they aren't making an insane amount like they heard people make at such and such company. And that doesn't even talk about going on to blind. I'm a big believer in more transparency around pay. And since I'm telling every headhunter on LinkedIn, I figured I should share it here. Even if it does feel really weird. Thanks, culture. This is my experience. Some people will be amazed at how much I've made, and others will wonder why I made so little or why it took me so long. Some people will be mad, and others may be inspired. But this is why I believe in more salary transparency. To start, we always have to take the cost of living into account. Value varies a lot across the United States, and that doesn't even get into international numbers. We Americans tend to make a lot more in salary, but spend a lot more in healthcare, education, and retirement. I'm not an expert in these things, so I won't get into it here, but something to keep in mind if you're discouraged seeing what other people make. For this exercise, I'll be using a cost of living adjustment calculator to give the numbers in Silicon Valley dollars. I'm using bank rates. I tested out a few, and this seemed to have the lowest change, so I went with it. To give you an idea, it's going to increase everything by 43% for me. And you can reverse it from Silicon Valley dollars to your local currency to get an idea. Of course, remote work makes this even more complicated. Some people got lucky and took their high cost of living salary, moved to a lower cost location, and they didn't have an adjustment. Good job to those people. With that out of the way, I started my tech career in a biology lab managing data. So we'll use this as the baseline. I made about 85,000 Silicon Valley dollars. After getting laid off, I had a friend tell me I should go into tech full time, so I packed my bags and left the science world behind, landing my first role as a database developer at a small nonprofit. I made 71,000 there. A slow start, but I figured it was getting my foot in the door and I had the chance to pick up some skills, because I had no idea what I was doing. I think my tech stack was SQL Server and Crystal reports. I knew the basics of SQL and Excel, but that was about it. 6 months pass, and my friend who pushed me in this direction reaches out and says there's a spot open with him, and I should apply to this senior database developer role in the financial industry. And I warned him, I have 6 months of experience, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, why not? So I did it, and now I was a senior making $143,000. There's two things to learn here. Networks are everything, and that is by far the best way to find new jobs. And second, anyone who takes titles seriously is dumb. People on Blind seem to be obsessed over what titles people have, but here I am, a senior with almost no skills. The tech at this place was mostly SQL Server, Postgres, .NET, SSIS, and SSRS. After some time there and actually getting the skills to back up the title of senior, I was bored and looking for the next thing. I made a pretty lateral move to a data integration developer role, still in the financial industry, and I was making $160,000 there. But I was mostly still doing C# and SSIS with SQL Server. I was still bored with that, so I quickly moved on to a fun startup real estate company. My title was data engineer, and I was finally working in the cloud, and I was making about $185K. But the best of all was the tech. We were using Azure and AWS, we got into Databricks, I started doing less SQL and more Python, more API work. It was nice to finally be working on the modern tech stacks. This is about when COVID hit. Up to this point, I'd been working hybrid my whole career, usually 3 to 4 days in office, 1 to 2 at home. Shortly into it, I got laid off again. I was worried about what was available and not having health insurance in an emerging pandemic, so I took the first thing I could, a small healthcare startup as a database engineer making $150K. A bit of a hit, but I wasn't planning on staying a long time. My tech stack there was mostly being on calls with people, trying to explain basic data practices. Though I did rewrite their SSIS into Python and SQL, so that's something. Soon when hiring picked back up, I found my way into Microsoft as a senior data scientist. I was really an engineer, but they just released that career track after I joined, and we didn't feel like changing the title. I was making $328,000 total, $243 base, and the rest in stock and bonuses. If the company you're interested in is on levels, it's pretty damn accurate. My tech was pretty much all Azure, Synapse, Databricks, Data Factory, Python functions, Spark, Kusto. I also picked up a lot more program management skills, planning out releases, building roadmaps, and finding teams to partner with. So as you can see, there's going to be some ups and downs. Sometimes I made 2 steps forward and sometimes one backwards. It might take a while. Salary increases seem to come in bursts. There were 2 occasions where I suddenly doubled what I was making. And sure, there's people who come out of college and go straight into Google, so their burst is early. And if that's your goal, go for it. But it's not the end of the world if that's not what happens for you. Also, don't forget that salary is not the only thing in the world. I know I'd have a lot more opportunity if I lived in Silicon Valley and agreed to work on site or hybrid, but I would be miserable there. I love being remote. There's also some industries doing a lot of hiring that I don't want anything to do with. And on top of that, a number of companies are moving to 4-day work weeks, which I would love. If you found value in this kind of transparency, give this video a like and feel free to comment your thoughts on salaries in the tech industry and if you think big FANG companies are worth it. I can see the appeal of killing yourself to get the absolute highest salary possible and just suffering through any of the negatives for a bit until you're set, but I don't think that's for everyone or even most people. So be careful if you're comparing your earnings to the people who are doing that. And if you're still questioning your value, be sure to watch this video on imposter syndrome next.